Okay, Reina.
So now you're live. You can go ahead.
Reina, I think we lost two of the speakers. They're online, but I can't.
Very much for being with us today. We are going to have a very interactive session. We have a panel with expertise covering fintechs, know-how of regulations, and of course we have one of the most known fintech startups presented by Islam. We apologize for the delay caused by some technical issues. Way to our panelists, we're going to ask them to start by presenting themselves and their background, where they come from, what have they done so far to contribute to the fintech ecosystem in Egypt and the region. So I'm going to ask Walid to go ahead. Please, Walid, tell us, introduce yourself and tell us about you.
Thank you, Noha, and thank you everyone on the panel. Also, I would like to thank African Summit for inviting us to speak here. I'm Walid Hassouna. I'm the CEO of EFG Finance, which is the non-bank financial institution of the investment bank EFG Holding. And what relates us to fintech is a couple of ventures that we have. So we have the first we have the first buy now, pay later in the Egyptian market, launched in 2017, December 2017, under the name of Value. We also have a partnership with one of the growing startups in the market of payment in the region, which is PayTabs. We have the 51% ownership in PayTabs EG, which is the joint venture of PayTabs and EFG Hermes to provide digital payment in the Egyptian market. And finally, we run in collaboration with Ministry of International Cooperation, a fintech incubator accelerator with a VC and a small VC transaction where we have invested in more than 18 startups out of Egypt, Jordan, UAE, and the US, and also in the fintech space. So this is how EFG would relate to the fintech theme in the region and especially in Egypt. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Walid. Mohammed, can you please introduce?
Okay, I'm currently the managing partner for Disruptech. It's an early stage VC fund focused on Egypt and focused on the fintech sector. Before that, I was the co-founder and managing director of Fawry. Fawry was the payment platform for I would say the infrastructure of Egypt for the last 10 years. And before that, I came from a telecom and IT background.
Thank you very much, Mohammed. Islam?
Hello, everyone.
Please
thank you, guys. Hello, fellow panelists. Thank you for the invite to talk on this panel. I'm Islam Shawi. I'm one of the co-founders and CEO of PayMob. At PayMob, we build infrastructure payment solutions for mobile network operators and banks in order to empower users and merchants with digital tools to perform digital transactions and have better access to financial services. To date, we have mostly an issuance platform where we run around now close to 90% of all mobile wallet transactions that are happening in Egypt runs on our platform through our partners, which Vodafone is the biggest. And on our merchant side, we're now becoming the largest digital acceptance, non-bank digital acceptance company when it comes to whether POS or online payment transactions in Egypt.
Thank you very, very much. Well, if we look at the North African region, African countries are home to most of the unbanked population, and we are the second largest continent. If we look at fintech and digital banking, we find that they are actually redefining what it means to be banked and unbanked. When discussing fintech in the region, North Africa, Egypt is amongst the leading countries, if not the leading fintech ecosystem and hub. If we look at the very first accelerator or incubator that started back in the year 2014, was managed and driven by Barclays Bank in Egypt, and was in partnership with Sawari Ventures, a venture capital fund that operates in the market. And today we have up to, or perhaps more, 40 active fintech startups on the ground. We have the government working on supporting regulations, whether it's the Central Bank of Egypt, the financial regulatory authority covering banks, insurance companies, leasing, and the rest of the subsectors within the financial industry. The government itself put together a £1 billion fund to invest in fintech startups at the early stage, where they can close a certain market gap that exists. If we look at the second most active market within the region as far as fintech is concerned, we find Tunisia. Although the market is not as big, but Tunisia has started long ago with the post office system in Tunisia, and they La Poste Tunisienne. 90% of the Tunisians actually have access to the post office, and they can do bill payments and card purchases and the like. One of it's a software development startup that actually built iFintech solutions, working with the Islamic Development Bank, managed to raise €4 million, and now they are expanding they're expanding into liquidity management solutions amongst other services. Morocco is not far away. They started with an e-commerce platform. They call it Mizari, and later on they expanded into offering financial services. They have launched a venture that is mainly focused on fintechs in Morocco and Africa called Outliers back in the year 2017. Algeria, they have a lot of activities happening on the ground. In Algeria, they have a partnership in between one of the key banks over there called Natixis with one of the fintech startups to actually boost that innovation within the region. So a lot of activities happening on the ground. Egypt, we are lucky a bit sooner than the majority of the countries, but luckily they are catching up, creating opportunities for fintech startups, and of course positioning and creating investment opportunities. Can you tell us a little bit about the recent trends that have actually been happening over the past 2-3 years within the fintech scene in Egypt and North Africa?
Sorry, who should answer the question? I'm sorry.
Walid, can you hear me?
Hello? Yes, I can hear you.
Walid,
yes.
can you? Okay, brilliant. Can you tell us a little bit about the latest emerging models and trends within the fintech ecosystem in Egypt and the region?
Yes. So basically, there were a lot of changes in the past 3 years. I think the past 3 years had been moving in a very fast pace. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, everything on fintech in Egypt started with payments, whether payment aggregation or facilitation or digital payments. So this was the starting point when the banks decided, or the Central Bank of Egypt was pushing for the wallet use. And actually, we have seen a lot of payment companies that emerged at this point in time. A year or 18 months later, we started to see another fintech players that are interested in the buy now, pay later. And I think I would claim that that our value launched in December 2017 was the first player to come to the market of buy now, pay later on a digital platform. Definitely, there was a lot of other players in the market before that, but with a very traditional method. And then I think this has opened up to other ideas like robo-advisory, like quant trading, RegTech, and a lot of InsurTech and other things. So as you well identified, Noha, there was a good move from markets like UAE and other markets to Egypt due to the population, and also due to the penetration of smartphones and the penetration of internet. So we have seen a lot of products right now that are really different than what everything looked like 3 years ago. 3 years ago, when we were screening for any fintech investment, it was mainly into payments. Also, there is a great push from the Central Bank of Egypt to help a fintech, even if they are not yet licensed under a certain law, to push for credit facilities for salary advances. We have very good companies in the Egyptian market that are doing a great job, like Khazna, like NowPay, and they were able recently to access financing from the banks, which was something that was very difficult for them to do, and actually that affected their scalability. So the changes are happening. The most important thing is that also the FRA is going to launch a fintech law that is going to help a lot of those companies to be regulated, or provide them with a sandbox, or even provide them with an innovation license. I hope this turns to be something very positive for the market, allows a lot of players to be hosted in Egypt rather than anywhere else. My only issue, and I think this is the only drawback about the Egyptian market, when it comes to fintech, why other fintechs I would look at ADGM in Abu Dhabi, or Dubai DFC, or even Saudi, is related to incentives on that, taxes, and also the severe competition with the banking system. But overall, I see a lot of support coming from Central Bank, coming from the FRA. Definitely, we need to push a little bit more on providing access to plastic cards, Visa and MasterCard for non-banks. I think this is something very important. One of our portfolio companies, PayNast, has been approved and issued the first card that is non-bank in cooperation with Visa. So we are ready to be the fintech hub of the region in Egypt. We have many applications, many use cases, and I think the improvement that happened in the past few years, was accelerated by many of the fintech that disrupted the market already. And I believe there will be more and more to see in the future. Again, one very important point: we need to make sure that we accelerate also the deregularization of the market to provide fintech with similar access to what banks had, with the exception of course, deposit taking, which I think will need a different license and a different capital. So this is in a nutshell the changes that I've seen in the market in the past 2 to 3 years when I started engaged in the fintech scene in Egypt.
Okay, thank you so much. So now you're live. You can go ahead.
So
Thank you very, very much, Walid. Well, actually, the efforts to support fintechs by efforts driven by the government is a common approach to growing and nurturing fintech ecosystem in the countries. You have mentioned that are really active in the Gulf and Tunisia and North Africa, for example. Last year they launched the fintech law that actually exempts fintechs from all sorts of taxations, and they even offer entrepreneurs a salary to be able to build their fintechs and grow it. In Egypt, the central bank has put together already the fintech sandbox as part of the nation's national fintech strategy, and it has actually accepted a couple of cohorts so far. So we are looking into growing that scheme of support in many, many other forms and size. We still have issues and challenges on the ground that we can overcome. But yeah, you have mentioned a few fintech startups that are operating in Egypt with success. Like we have PayMob, we have PayMe, we have Fawri, we have Hawishli, of course, Value, we have Now Pay, Moneyfellow, Spacecard, Shirka, DuPay, Khazna, and the like. And those are mainly, as you said, on the payment scene. I would like to ask Islam about what's next. Where do you think the trend is going? What are the areas of, what are the financial services where we are going to have sort of tackling and attending to later on?
Well, I think we're just scratching the surface. I mean, I don't see where we're just getting started over here. I think the opportunity is immense, whether you talking about unbanked, underserved. Either we have a lot of the banking sector that's still underserved. So I believe there are huge potentials when it comes to consumers, users, and merchants. I believe if I can summarize the last 10 years, we're mostly building the infrastructure. I think now Egypt has a great infrastructure when it comes to the issuance side. There are cards. There are more than 17, 18 million wallets right now. We have interoperability. We have unified QR code for merchants. So on the infrastructure side, I think we're checking almost all the boxes. On the merchant side as well, because we really need to see the balance between the issuance and the acceptance. Because at the end of the day, when you have a lot of wallets or you have cards but nowhere people can use them, they queue in front of the ATM in order to cash out, like we see. So now I really believe in the acceptance side, because I feel the issuance side is on track with Misa, of course. Just launched a year and a half ago. So I think the acceptance side is something very important, and this is something we at PayMob we're focusing in 100%. And of course, the central bank has issued the 100,000 POS initiative that was just finished, and thankfully our team in PayMob has emerged the biggest winner for this initiative in terms of volumes. So the infrastructure is one side, and this is what I call the enablement phase. And the financial services is what I call activation phase. So I mean, I have a tool, I have a wallet, I have a card. I need a use case so that makes me use this wallet or use this card. And this is what I see all of the players are working on. So when Walid was talking about NBFIs, you're talking about salary advance, you're talking about consumer finance, insurance, all of these non-bank FI solutions and products, they need to be built on a robust infrastructure where they can interact with their clients, whether they are merchants or micro merchants or whether they are users. And this is what I see the next decade in Egypt is going to be all about. It's going to be about the activation phase, and I think NBFIs are going to play a huge role in this.
Thank you very much, Islam. Well, I tend to agree that non-banking financial institutions do have a huge opportunity within the Egyptian and North Africa market. But they have somehow a bit more flexibility than banks when it comes to managing their operating models on the ground, customer acquisition, and even the development, the design of financial services to tackle and attend certain customer needs. They have proven, at least in Egypt, to be more agile on the ground when it comes to adopting new technology trend and attending to customer needs, as we said. If we look at Egypt and North Africa market, it is becoming a destination for foreign investment, especially in area. Mohammed, what drove that positioning? What did we do right, and what do we need to do more of in order to position Egypt and North as the investment destination?
Okay, let me just give you my view of why Egypt is very attractive to everybody. First of all, we are a very big country with more than 100 million people, mostly young and mostly digitally connected. So these are potential for all type of tech services. On the other hand, you will find that the banking infrastructure that has been developed over the years in Egypt are behind, or at least have a lot of limitations that created a lot of gaps that needs to be filled. And the fintech companies are very well positioned to fill these gaps. What actually was happening before the COVID-19 and was highly accelerated by COVID-19 is the government, the presidency, and the central bank have adopted two things: the digital transformation and financial inclusion as as two important things on the national agenda. And with that, a lot of things that were not even possible to talk about in terms of forcing electronic payment in some government transactions, giving a lot of licenses to fintech companies, allow the payment facilitation, the payment aggregation model of where the fintechs are cooperating with banks have been always issued. One major thing I would mention here that in the COVID-19 crisis, in the middle of that, the central bank have made a very courageous action where he allowed the electronic KYC to happen without having to sign paper, which was a major milestone for all the fintechs that we were hoping to happen and were never expected to happen that fast. So beside the things that I mentioned earlier, COVID-19 came as an accelerator. So it actually canceled, I would say, 2 years of waiting for all the fintechs who want us to do something for the future. What happened with COVID-19 is actually it did not even change the regulator and the government behavior only, but also to change the consumer behavior. I mean, the consumer now was very much open to use electronic payment, electronic digital lending, digital services. I gave an example of that. Mostly before the COVID-19, most of the transaction happening online as an e-commerce transaction was completed with a cash on delivery thing, which is mean the digital services were there, but the payment was not catching up. But what happened with the COVID-19, people tried or forced to try the paying through a digital, either a card or a mobile wallet, as Islam mentioned, or many tools that was available in their pockets but were never used. And we've seen a great increase in this usage happening by virtue of the COVID-19. And they discovered that it is working. They were reluctant. They were not that. They don't have many reasons to do that. But now they tried it and it works. So I think the next phase for Egypt, between the next 3 or 5 years, are the golden age, I would say, for fintech specifically, and the e-commerce. I would link them both together because they are linked in a way or another. The market is opening up, not only in the traditional payments acceptance space, but also in the digital lending space, in the data analytics space, in the digitization of many sectors, like, for example, one of the sectors that is very traditional, that like FMCG. So we will see a lot of things happening very quickly, much quicker than we used to see in the previous 2 years. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Mohammed. And thank you for bringing up COVID-19 and its impact on the consumer behavior. Basically, COVID has caused a lot of changes within the operating models of e-commerce platforms, startups on the ground, and even the incumbent banks, insurance companies, and companies operating within the other sectors and industries. This has created or has made certain fintech use cases a lot more attractive for consumers. Where do you see the trend going? What are the fintech use cases that are going to be proven of most value to the consumers and to grow extensively within the region over the coming few years? And why?
Thanks, Noha. So this is my first test of the technology. Can you hear me, first of all?
Yes.
Good.
Yeah.
My God, this was the most painful logging on I've had in some time, but it's all working now. I figured out you needed a VPN because it was a bit complex on my side. Anyway, thanks for the question. It's a really great one. And I'm sorry?
Perhaps you could tell us a little bit about your background. I mean, I think you're about the only person in here who's not joining in from Cairo or from Egypt. So
yeah,
your background and what you.
Egyptian. That's all I'm going to say. No, joking aside, my name is Bassel Muftah. I'm a general partner at Global Ventures based out of the UAE. It's a great panel. I mean, been listening to what everybody said, and I think a lot has been already covered from the perspective of Egypt. One of the interesting things about sitting in the UAE and what we do at Global Ventures is we get to look at the global landscape of what's happening, right? And kind of try to look a couple of steps ahead. I agree with Waleed, I agree with Mohammed. A number of fundamental problems in Egypt have been solved, whether it's what you built at Fawri or what has been built around the payments and PayMob and so on. Those were really foundational pieces. But as we look forward, I think digitization, COVID has made it clear that the world needs to go digital. I mean, we're having this event.
Can you hear Bassel? I can't hear him. I'm sorry.
Sorry, can you hear me?
We can hear him clearly. Waleed, you obviously have.
Waleed, can you hear me now?
Clearly,
Should I continue, Waleed?
Waleed, can you
hear? Mohammed, can you hear me by any chance?
I can hear everyone but Bassel. I don't know why.
Okay.
Okay, perhaps I can recap after.
Sure. I'll make it short. I'll make it short. From where we're sitting, we're looking at kind of future trends, future things. One of the interesting ones is something already, that EFG and knows really well, which is the buy now, pay later. And I'm glad that Egypt already has a platform to build it, but there is definitely a big trend happening around buy now, pay later going on. I mean, 3 months ago, if you had asked me whether this was going to be a hot sector, I would have probably said, I'm not sure. But now we're seeing a huge acceleration. And I think COVID is showing that consumers are not just looking for ability to pay online, but they're also looking for credit. They're looking for payment facilitations. They're looking for other products. And what's interesting about these products is they're much higher margin. And so one of the things really we need to be careful with in North Africa is to make sure that it's not just solving the fundamental problems of cash in, cash out, or payment acceptance, but it's also looking at some of these high value, high margin products, because they will accelerate certain players much faster than other players.
Well, definitely lending is one of the bread and butter of banks, and if we're looking into fintechs, definitely lending is one of the go-to business models that grow quickly. But if we look at the Egyptian market and most of the African countries with such high rates of being financially excluded, they do not have that financial credit history that can actually enable lending, even building alternative scorecards, needs some sort of input. And in the absence of the digital identity in most of, as an infrastructure in most of the markets and the region, how do you see technology tackling those issues, or how do you see fintechs going around those issues on the ground?
But the reality is people are building a digital
lending.
But the reality is people are building a digital footprint, right? When they're starting to use certain websites over and over again, when they're starting to buy food, and when they're starting to consume telco services, they're starting to become regular clients on e-commerce website, they're building a digital footprint. That can be turned into a credit score. Lending is the step after you get credit rating, right? So what we need to be able to first solve is what's the credit worthiness of someone, and then we can decide what products we can lend to them. People's salary, digitizing salaries, that payment cycle, Now Pay, and what they're doing is fantastic, very important. Getting people to move money around electronically, whether it's transfers, again, paying online, all of that is creating footprints. The faster that moves, the faster we can get to the high value products like lending or like trading, or giving people an ability to consume what Islam, I think, termed as financial services products.
Thank you very much, Bassel. Well, the absence of credit history does not mean that there is an absence of financial data that we can use to assess credit worthiness. Thank you very much for raising that point and making it clear. We have covered the roles of banking financial institutions and the models that are currently being represented. Where do you see banks standing? How can banks influence, or how would they influence the fintech ecosystem and seen in the region? Can they contribute to its growth? What can they benefit out of it? And the question goes first to Mohammed, and then the rest of the panelists add to that, because I believe it's a very important point that we need to raise.
In the new phase, I would say the new era, there is no competition between fintech and banks. I mean, this cannot continue to go on. But what's happening now that you will see the regulator giving a lot of license, like SME license or a second-tier banking in Egypt, as an example. There is also a license for a digital bank. Among the other licenses that are already there for consumer lending and the microfinance. So basically, the licensing issue, or the license that will protecting the banks' territory is not an issue anymore. So fintech can acquire license and can work. But however, for this to work, still the banks have the funding. They have a lot of infrastructure that's still there, a legacy. They have also majority of the A-class customer. So the cooperation has to happen between banks. For example, I would say a big bank would be interested to go into and apply for an SME banking license, or an SME would need a lot of rails to ride on those. We need a cash in, cash out. They need a payment facilitator. They need an online gateway company. So he needs he need a digital KYC provider. So he needs a number of fintechs that are providing services for the bank to issue a product. And the same for the non-banking financial institution ones. They will need number of fintechs, each of them, to help them to build a complete service. So I don't see the market is going into aggressive competition, rather than it's going into more of collaboration. The more we understand that, the more the market will move faster forward. And I think it applies to other markets, not only in Egypt. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mohammed. Walid, Bassel, or Islam, would you wish to comment on that question? Any of you? Go ahead, Walid.
I would love to come. Yeah, I would love to comment on that, because basically the banks are trying to move into fintech. The problem is I've spent most of my career working in commercial banks. So the main problem is that they are trying to move into this within the bank itself, and I would like to congratulate Bank Masr, because they have done the right move. They have established their digital company, so they moved the digital company outside the bank boundaries, and I think this is going to pay off easily, because now they are free from the. It's not only about regulation; it's about the mindset. So you cannot work, even if you build a department for digital onboarding or for digital lending in the bank. The problem is you still work with the same mindset of the bank. So I think this is a very good move. I appreciated it a lot that they had made this move. The other thing is that there are some areas that the banks are not really equipped to do, because basically in payment service providers, PSPs, guys like PayMob, like PayTabs, like Payfort, actually the banks would ask them to come and go and acquire the business for them, because they are more flexible. They provide more solutions. Their cost of operation is a lot less than the normal cost of operation of the banks. So the banks would be more than happy to actually outsource different businesses, whether on tech, whether on acquiring, whether on microfinancing. We offload a big portion of our portfolio in our microfinance business, Tanmaya, to banks, and we offload this on their balance sheet without recourse on us, because they understand quite well the mechanics of actually trying to penetrate a market of microfinance would require a different skill set, different agility levels, and also it needs a lot of flexibility and responsiveness. So we see banks coming to us, and they are willing to actually buy our portfolio, so that they still have access to the microfinance segment, still enjoy a higher return on their portfolio, but without actually going into the process of trying to acquire those customers. Finally, there is a kind of competition on some products, very limited products that we have competition on between banks and fintech, and the only one that we see real competition in would be buy now, pay later. But the competition actually is between 3-4 banks and the other players in the market from the other side. One thing that that we need to figure out, I think it's very important to unlock the value of fintech in Egypt, is especially fintech in lending. They need to have access to balance sheet and early stage, so they can finance their transactions. I've seen FRA trying to develop some funds to do that. I see banks are Central Bank of Egypt is giving banks a green light to go and lend to fintech that are in the lending process, but still, to be scalable, this amounts need to be bigger, because small amounts will not allow scaling fast. And we see other players coming from the UAE or Saudi with supported by huge bank lines, and coming to markets like Egypt or Saudi or the UAE, that are accordingly they can definitely grow faster. So this is my 2 cents on the banks and fintech question.
Thank you very much. Well, like adding on or building on the accelerating growth of like having fintech start moving, fintech companies, service providers moving from other markets to the Egyptian market. Islam, where do you see fintech, Egyptian expanding beyond the Egyptian market? So if you decided to work on an expansion plan, where your next destination?
Definitely, thank you, Noah, for this. I mean, digital acceptance, for example, it's not an Egypt-only play, because if you're talking about an over-the-top player, I mean, a voice-on-demand or a video-on-demand company, they don't only operate in Egypt or in North Africa. So they're looking for what we call global or regional payment service provider who can unlock local payment methods in various territories. And this is actually what PayMob is doing right now. Is that we were the first. This is something we're very proud of, that we are the first Egyptian company, fintech company, to actually operate outside Egypt. So we started with Jordan 2 years ago. Now we're live in Jordan, we're live in Kenya, we're live in Pakistan, in Palestine, and next year we'll be live in Libya, and we're applying for a license in Saudi, and also we're looking at two big African countries to apply for license in, because we believe that yes, we have the technology, we have the know-how, and given the size that everyone is talking about, we have a lot of lessons learned due to the size of the Egyptian market, and this is a regional problem. A lot of cash-based emerging markets are there that have similar problems to what we have, and a lot of major players, especially in the digital front, they're suffering from the lack of payment methods and the lack of tools where their clients can pay them, whether you're talking about voice on demand or video or gaming, major gaming companies. So I believe that this is the positioning we're taking. We want to be the payment gateway for the MEA region. This is what we're going after, and I believe that there is huge room. I mean, we're talking only about Egypt, but I mean, if you factored in the MEA region, this is a massive opportunity, and this is what PayMob is looking to participate in.
But can I add something?
Thank
really
you very
to that, Noha?
Of course, go ahead.
I think Walid touched on it slightly, but I think it's important to mention. I don't know a single fintech that doesn't have plan to also expand its product lines, right? So many of them say, I'm starting with, the salary and lending against salaries, or I'm doing buy now, pay later, or I'm thinking right now in the UAE, we're seeing a lot of ideas around people trying to fractionalize real estate investment, right? So instead of buying a whole house, you can buy a piece of a house, and many people can participate on a platform. So there's lots of new ideas. Yeah, tokenization. But I think what's interesting about it is every single one of them, when you push the entrepreneur or you push the fintech, you find that they have other plans, right? So I'm going to use my customer base later on to, securitize or to productize or to provide them a different type of product, or I'm going to give them insurance on top of their property, or whatever the case might be. And it's a really difficult choice, right? I don't know, I don't really know the best advice for this, but I will say as every fintech has to be very careful between going in regional and deepening its product portfolio, right? And I think this is a real question that they have to think about.
Thank you very much.
Sorry?
Thank you for bringing that up. I mean, thank you for bringing that up. That's a very... Do we want fintech startups to turn into banks? I mean, the value they brought to the table and why they're agile and successful so far is because they have managed to disintegrate the value proposition offered by banks, and they've focused on one service. They excelled at, and they expanded their customer base. Do we want fintech startups to go deeper into their product portfolio and offer multiple services or not? Is that the right way to grow and the right way to go or not? I mean, that's a question that needs to be answered. I mean, if it's up to me and I'm given advice, I would literally advise each and every startup to focus and trade on their competitive advantage, where they add value the most, and expand their customer base geographically. I would advise that they go into other revenue streams from other financial services. However, they can club forces and combine forces with other fintech startups that have other services within their portfolios. I mean, this is what I would recommend and advise. I mean, this is a really interesting discussion, but unfortunately, we are coming really close to the end of our panel, and we have attended already to a couple of questions that were shared by our audience. One question that is there: what is the biggest hindrance or threat to the growth of the region's fintech ecosystem? So the fintech ecosystem is growing significantly. What can stop it. Mohammed, if you wish to comment on that.
Yeah, I think one of the major risks that I can see from my new position as a VC manager now is the, I would say, overvaluation of startups that can lead at one point of time to some of them, not all of them, to fail to raise at a desirable price. And that would end in some companies getting out of the market in a not a very nice way. And that can really harm the whole ecosystem. So that's one risk. I mean, 10 years ago, when we started Fawry, the funding was a major issue. And the funding was really an exercise that you have to work for years to get a decent amount of fund. But now the funding is there and excessively there. Good founders, good companies find more money than they need. And the valuation is growing based on supply and demand, not based on value. And that's a risk on the whole ecosystem from my point of view. I don't see the regulation, by the way, as a major hindering, because I think the regulation now is moving in a good pace. And ultimately, we don't want to use the regulation as an excuse, because I mean, a lot of things can be happening or being done without need to go for I'll take two examples from different sectors. Fawry and Kareem both happened and succeed in the region without having to have a solid regulation in place. But the regulation happens as they grow, and they manage to comply with this going forward. So that's my comment on this.
We have one last question that was shared with one of the attendees in here on the role of the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, or what we call the AFTCA. It's pretty long. What is its role in changing the fintech scene within Africa and Egypt, and would the Afrexim Bank plan of having a single digital currency for intergovernment settlements contribute or drive that change within the fintech scene? Who wishes to attend to that question?
I'll give a partial answer, not a full answer, because I think there's a lot to it. I mean, first of all, it's interesting. Every company we've invested in Egypt, there's always been a discussion: do you go south or do you go kind of east? And I think for lots of reasons, you know, the language being one of them, people think about Egypt, about Saudi, about UAE. While from where I sit, I think the opportunity is south for Egyptian startups, right? Now, regulations and things like treaties and cross-border and cross-continent treaties have been around for some time, have been, in my opinion, ineffective as a whole to drive the commerce that's needed. Although, interestingly enough, the effects of the ACFTCA over the last 2 years have been very positive. So a lot of Egyptian companies are now, from a commerce perspective, moving south, trading, you know, south with their neighbors, building roads. We've seen a lot of startups go from Egypt into sub-Saharan Africa, and vice versa for that matter. So I guess I would say I'm more bullish than I've been in a long time about the effects of this treaty, but I think there's a lot of skills that still need to be gathered within Egyptian startups in particular to be able to take full advantage of it.
Okay, thank you very much, Bassel. As the Vice President of the Africa Fintech Network, which is the union of the fintech associations within the continent, I would say that having the right organizing framework in between African countries can definitely drive the digital economy enormously. And like you've said, digital inclusion, if you can build that footprint, can lead to enabling, offering financial services. So I would say that the initiative of building a single digital currency for the African countries can facilitate trade in an unprecedented manner, having platforms that can actually enable exports and imports amongst African countries can definitely reshape and change the fintech scene within Africa. I would like to thank my esteemed panelists all for their input today. That was very informative, very interesting panel discussion. I hope we've answered the questions that were raised by attendees in here, and looking forward to seeing you again. Thank you very much for Africa Fintech Summit for having us in here. Have a pleasant day. Enjoy the rest of the panels. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you, guys. Thank you. Great.
Thank you.